Before 1956, the world was a collection of distinct economies, each producing and consuming largely within its own borders. Getting goods from one continent to another was a slow, agonizing process. Imagine a ship pulling into port. Not just one ship, but hundreds, lining the docks. Then a human tide of dock workers would swarm, meticulously unloading every single item. Sacks of coffee, crates of machinery, barrels of oil. Each piece handled individually, sometimes dozens of times. A single ship could spend a week, even longer, just sitting there, burning money, while its cargo slowly bled from its hold onto the pier. Up to 75% of the total shipping cost was eaten up right there in port. Then everything would be reloaded onto trucks, then trains, then maybe another ship, all by hand. The cost of loading a single ton of cargo averaged around $5.83. This wasn't just inefficient, it was a fundamental bottleneck that choked the potential of global trade. But then, a seemingly simple steel box appeared. A box that dropped that cost to just 16 cents a ton. A box that didn't just change shipping, it quietly rewired the entire global economy. How did one unassuming metal rectangle achieve such a seismic shift? And who was the man audacious enough to force this box onto a reluctant, world-gutting ancient industries and laying the unseen groundwork for globalization as we know it today? Our story begins not on the high seas, but on the dusty roads of North Carolina in 1935. Malcolm McLean, a young entrepreneur, buys a used truck and starts hauling tobacco. He builds his business from the ground up, eventually owning one of America's largest trucking companies. McLean was intimately familiar with the brutal inefficiency of logistics. He watched his trucks, loaded with valuable cargo, arrive at ports only to sit for days. He'd see crews laboriously unload everything, piece by piece, from his truck onto the ship, and then again from the ship onto another truck at the destination. It was an endless, wasteful dance. McLean saw a clear problem: the constant breaking down and rebuilding of cargo units at every transfer point. Why not, he wondered, just move the whole truck trailer onto the ship? Early attempts were clumsy. Truck chassis were heavy, the wheels took up too much space. It wasn't the truck itself that needed to move, but the cargo box it carried. This simple insight would spark a revolution. To bypass the restrictive trucking regulations preventing him from owning both trucking and shipping operations, McLean made a strategic move in 1955. He acquired the Pan-Atlantic Steamship Company. His vision was taking shape. McLean's ambition, however, crashed headfirst into a world stubbornly built for the old ways. Dock workers, represented by powerful unions like the International Longshoremen's Association, had jobs that relied on the traditional, labor-intensive method of loading and unloading ships. Millions of livelihoods were tied to the inefficiencies McLean sought to eliminate. Their work was physically demanding, often dangerous, but it was their legacy, their power. The ports themselves were relics, designed for break-bulk cargo with finger piers and crowded warehouses, not the vast open spaces a standardized box system would demand. Every ship, every truck, every rail car was a unique puzzle, its cargo a chaotic mix of shapes and sizes. Theft was rampant as goods passed through countless hands. Damage was constant. It was a system that had worked for centuries, but it was slow, expensive, and resistant to change. McLean knew he couldn't just build a better box. He had to build an entirely new system to move it. McLean's company, now renamed Sealand Service, embarked on a daring experiment. They bought a converted tanker, the Ideal X, and modified it to carry custom-built steel boxes. These early containers, designed with engineer Keith Tantlinger, featured crucial corner castings that allowed them to be lifted, stacked, and locked securely. On April 26, 1956, the Ideal X's set sail from Port Newark, New Jersey, bound for Houston, Texas, carrying a mere 58 containers on its deck. This wasn't just a ship carrying cargo, it was a ship carrying an idea. But the early days were far from easy. Other shipping companies, skeptical of the massive investment required, were slow to adopt the new method. Ports, too, hesitated, seeing no reason to abandon their traditional, labor-intensive operations. The longshoremen unions saw the writing on the wall, recognizing that this steel box threatened to automate away their very existence. This wasn't just a business dispute, it was a clash between an industrial past and an automated future. McLean, however, pressed on, expanding Sealand's container operations along the East and Gulf coasts and to Puerto Rico, slowly proving the concept's viability. Then in 1966, McLean took his container revolution global, launching regular container service between the S in Europe. But even with sea-land success, the true bottleneck wasn't the box itself, nor the ships. It was the lack of standards. If a container from one company couldn't fit on another company's truck, or be lifted by a different port's crane, the entire system would collapse into the old chaos. This realization led to the unexpected twist, the very organization that would unify this. Disparate World wasn't a corporate giant, but the International Organization for Standardization, or ISO. In 1967, standards committees began the painstaking work of defining common dimensions, fittings, and handling requirements. In 1968, ISO 668 was introduced, setting the crucial dimensions, an 8-foot width and common lengths of 20 and 40 feet. This seemingly bureaucratic step was the true moment of liberation for the container. It meant any box could now fit on any ship, any truck, any train, anywhere in the world. It transformed a proprietary system into a universal language of logistics. The container's ultimate validation arrived during the Vietnam War. The U.S., military facing monumental logistical challenges in Southeast Asia, desperately needed a more efficient way to move supplies. They adopted containerization heavily, and the results were immediate and dramatic. Cargo delays, which had previously plagued military operations, were drastically reduced. Logistics efficiency improved substantially, proving the container's power on an unprecedented scale. Back home, major ports worldwide could no longer ignore the undeniable economic advantages. Throughout the 1970s, they began a massive, expensive overhaul, rebuilding their entire infrastructure. Traditional finger piers, which had lined city centers for centuries, were rendered obsolete. In their place rose vast, open container terminals with acres of storage space, deep water access, dedicated rail links, and towering gantry cranes capable of plucking a 40-foot box off a ship and placing it precisely onto a waiting truck or train. This wasn't just an upgrade, it was a total reimagining of global commerce. A modern terminal could now remove and replace a container every 90 seconds. The once week-long process of loading a ship was now measured in mere hours. The container had won. By the 1980s, container shipping wasn't just an option. It was the standard method for moving manufactured goods internationally. The cost of cargo loading plummeted by roughly 97% from $5.83 per ton to just 16 cents. This collapse in shipping costs didn't just make goods cheaper, it fundamentally altered global supply chains. Factories could now be located anywhere in the world where labor was cheapest, raw. Materials were accessible, and regulations were favorable, knowing that the cost of shipping the finished product wouldn't negate the savings. This unleashed an era of unprecedented globalization. Entire industries migrated across oceans. Consumer goods became dramatically more affordable. Yet this revolution came at a steep price for those in the old system. The traditional dock worker, whose skilled labor had been essential for centuries, was largely replaced by a handful of crane operators and logistics staff. While Malcolm McLean himself, after his monumental success, would later experience a personal setback. When his United States lines collapsed in 1986 after an aggressive expansion, his invention had already reshaped the world. Today, the largest container vessels can carry over 24,000 20-foot equivalent units, or TEUs, forming the invisible backbone of almost all global merchandise trade by volume. The story of the shipping container isn't just about a box. It's a profound lesson in the power of standardization and systems thinking. McLean didn't invent a new type of ship or a faster crane. He created an intermodal system where the container itself was the constant, moving seamlessly between ship, rail, and road. This simple, elegant solution removed friction, dramatically cut costs, and unlocked a scale of global trade previously unimaginable. It shows how incremental, often unglamorous innovations in infrastructure can have more transformative power than any flashy new technology. The humble steel box, often unseen, unheard, and uncelebrated, became the silent engine of globalization, connecting continents, enabling dispersed supply chains, and delivering the abundance of the modern world. It proved that sometimes the most revolutionary ideas are also the most boring and the most impactful. What other overlooked innovations do you think have had such a massive, yet quiet impact on the world? Share your thoughts in the comments below and consider subscribing for more stories about the hidden forces that shape our lives.